The painting you're looking at right now was created in 1787, and it depicts one of the most famous deaths in the history of Western civilization. A man sits upright on a stone bed, completely calm, completely certain, reaching for a cup of poison as if he were reaching for a glass of water. Around him, his friends collapse in grief. One turns away, another buries his face in his hands, and yet, the man at the center of all this anguish appears utterly unafraid. His name is Socrates, and this is the moment he chose to die. The painting is called The Death of Socrates, and it was painted by the French artist Jacques-Louis David, who was already one of the most celebrated painters in all of Europe by the time he completed it. But what makes this work so extraordinary is not just the technical mastery behind it, it is what it communicates. Because this is not simply a painting about death, it is a painting about what a person is willing to die for. And when you begin to look at it more carefully, you will notice that every single element in this composition, every figure, every gesture, every object has been placed there with a very specific purpose. Nothing is accidental. David constructed this scene the way a playwright constructs a stage, and once you understand what he was trying to say, you will never look at this painting the same way again. To understand why this painting hit so hard when it was first exhibited, you need to go back two places at once: ancient Athens and revolutionary Paris. Socrates lived in Athens in the 5th century BC. He was not a politician, not a general, not a man of wealth. He was a philosopher who spent his days wandering the streets, asking questions about justice, about virtue, about what it truly means to live a good life. And that, it turns out, was enough to get him killed. In 399 BC, he was put on trial by the Athenian government, charged with impiety and corrupting the youth of Athens with his ideas. Found guilty, he was given a choice: exile or death by drinking hemlock, a poison that slowly paralyzes the body until it reaches the heart. Socrates chose the hemlock, not because he had no other option, but because he refused to abandon his principles to save his own life. For Socrates, an unjust act was worse than death itself. This story had been told for centuries, but in 1787, when David chose to paint it, it carried an entirely different charge. France was on the edge of collapse. The monarchy was strangling the country, corruption was everywhere, and intellectuals were beginning to ask the same dangerous questions Socrates had asked 2,000 years earlier. When Parisians saw this painting at the Salon of 1787, they did not just see an ancient philosopher dying with dignity, they saw a man of principle destroyed by a corrupt institution, a government that feared ideas more than it feared injustice. Within 2 years, the French Revolution had begun. Now let's look at what David actually painted, because this is where things get truly remarkable. The first thing you notice is the light. The entire scene is bathed in a cold, almost clinical brightness that falls directly on Socrates, leaving the edges of the room in shadow. This was a deliberate choice. In painting, light means moral clarity, and David is telling you without a single word that this man, this condemned man, is the only one in the room who can truly see. Look now at Socrates himself. He sits completely upright, his body tense with energy, his hand already reaching for the cup of hemlock. But notice what his other hand is doing. He is pointing upward, toward the heavens, toward the world of ideas he has spent his entire life defending. He is not afraid. He is mid-sentence. Even in his final moments, Socrates is teaching. Now move your eyes outward to the figures surrounding him. David painted 12 disciples gathered around Socrates, a number that is not accidental. The parallel to Christ and his apostles was absolutely intentional, and it elevates Socrates from a historical figure into something almost sacred, a martyr of reason. Each figure reacts differently to what is about to happen. The young man at the far left, slumped against the wall, his back turned to the scene, is believed to be Plato, Socrates' most famous student. Historically, Plato was not present at the death of his teacher, and some scholars believe David placed him there precisely to signal that this figure is removed from the moment, recording it, grieving it, but unable to stop it. It is worth noting that at the time of Socrates' death, Plato was actually around 28 years old, yet David painted him as an old man. This was intentional. He wanted to represent Plato as the philosopher the world would come to know, not the young student who was absent that day. The man handing Socrates the cup of hemlock cannot bring himself to watch. He turns his face away, his arm extended, delivering the poison while refusing to witness what it will do. And Socrates takes it without hesitation, almost impatiently, as if death is simply the next step in an argument he has already won. At his feet, barely visible, you can see the chains that had bound him during his imprisonment. They are loose now, scattered on the stone floor. A small but powerful detail. The body may have been imprisoned. The mind never was. And then there is the architecture. The cell David paints is deliberately stark. Bare stone walls, a low arch, a single shaft of light. There is no comfort here, no softness. It feels like the inside of a tomb. And yet somehow, because of the way Socrates holds himself at the center of it all, the room feels less like a prison and more like a stage, a final lecture hall, the last classroom of the greatest teacher who ever lived. Today, the Death of Socrates hangs in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and standing in front of it, what strikes you most is not the tragedy of the scene, it is the stillness at the center of it. Everyone around Socrates is falling apart, and he is the calmest person in the room. That is what David understood better than almost any painter of his era. That the most powerful thing you can put on a canvas is not action, not drama, not spectacle, but conviction. The absolute, unshakable certainty of a man who has decided what he believes and is willing to pay any price for it. There is also something quietly unsettling about this painting that stays with you long after you've looked away. Because David was not just painting ancient Athens, he was painting a warning, a reminder that throughout history, the people most dangerous to those in power have never been soldiers or rebels. They have been the ones who asked the right questions at the wrong time. Socrates asked them, and the city killed him for it. What David asks us, standing in front of this painting more than 2 centuries later, is simple. Would we have done the same? Would any of us have the courage to reach for that cup? I would love to know what you think in the comments. Do you believe Socrates made the right choice? And is there a painting you would like me to analyze next? I will see you in the next video.